Welcome to another exciting ceramics video. Today we're making a textured slab cup. You'll need 2 wooden slats, the blue for a thin slab, a rolling pin, and one of the arrowhead or spear-headed knives. And your texture. Make sure you roll a flat slab, no bumps, and nice even slab. Make sure the rolling pin can roll across it easily. You're going to then put your texture in. Make sure you're putting your texture all over the slab since you're not sure where you're going to be cutting the pieces out of. It's okay if the textures overlap. I would go all the way to the edge too. And make sure you're rolling the texture in deep. Alright, you're going to use the cup template for the cup. You need 4 sides of the cup, and the bottom cup template you only need 1 of. You're going to start by cutting one of the sides out using the knife and a nice perpendicular cut. So a right angle from the table. You want a straight cut to begin with. Remember to cut towards your dominant hand. You can move the cloth around to make it more comfortable, to make better cuts. You can put your scraps off to the side. You're going to use them later for coils inside the cup. Make sure you also cut out your cup bottom. This part does not have to have texture. You can have texture on the bottom of your cup if you want. Once again, making sure you're doing straight cuts, perpendicular from the tabletop, so that's a right angle. And I'm going to cut to my right to make it easier for myself. And I cut all my other slabs out already, so I have all 4 of my sides, but they're a little too bendy because I just pulled the clay out, so I'm going to go to the heat gun. Alright, now I'm going to use the heat gun for a couple minutes on each side, so check them as you go. You do not want them to dry out. You don't want them to be quite leather hard, but you don't want them to be wet either. So make sure you move the hairdryer around a few inches away from it. Keep it moving. Don't keep it in one spot. It'll dry out that spot too much. You want an even dry. When they feel like they're starting to dry up a little bit, you can flip them and dry the other side. Just be careful when you're picking them up. Alright, now I'm back at the table. I'm going to use my spear-headed knife, a fork, sponge, some water, and sculpture tools. So you can use the rubber-tipped one or the wooden one I have here. I'm going to start putting the cup together. I'm going to make sure I'm working on with the textured side down and that my slabs are not too flimsy. So the textured side is against the table. I'm going to cut a 45-degree angle. So a bevel. And I like to cut towards myself. A straight line, pretty much cutting the corner off of the slab. So a bevel is a 45-degree angle from the table, and I work my way around. I'm only cutting the sides and the bottom of the cup. Putting my scraps aside. So the bottom and the 2 sides, not the top. The top needs to stay flat. Now I'm going to cut the bottom piece out of my cup. So all 4 sides on the bottom. Making sure I'm doing that nice 45-degree angle, that nice bevel. If you don't cut it straight the first time, you can go in and recut it. That's what I'm doing here. Cutting all 4 sides. Alright, so I cut all of my sides, leaving the top flat. So cutting bevel in the 2 sides and the bottom. of all 4 of my cup sides. I'm going to start to slip and score them together. So I'm going to use the water and the fork. I want to make sure I'm putting enough water on the fork so that I create slip as I score. It's going to act like a glue that holds them together, and the scoring is going to be like Velcro. Make sure you do the correct 2 sides when you're putting it together. Adding a little more water to my fork, making sure I'm creating slip as I score. And I like to score in 2 directions. So I went vertical and I'm going horizontal. I'm going to put the 2 pieces together. And these are going to be a right angle. So I'm squeezing a little and supporting with both of my hands. So you see my finger pressing the outside of the cup. My hand is on the inside supporting it. I'm going to flip it around to show you what I mean. So while I was pushing the outside angle, my inside hand was supporting that. I'm going to make a quick coil. You want it to be thinner than a pencil. You don't want a thick coil here. You want a coil that's just going to fill in the corner there to hold it together. I'm just going to put it on here and just rip it off where I need to measure it. You can use a knife to cut if you want to, and I'm going to slip and score where I'm going to put the coil. So inside the cup corner that I'm working on, and at the coil itself, I'm going to slip and score. Vertical and horizontal. I'm going to put that in the corner that I just put together. I'm going to smooth that down so it smooths into the edges like it was never there at all. Making sure I'm pressing and supporting it on the other side with the hand you can't see. So behind that, my left hand is supporting it while my right hand smooths that coil down. It's okay if it's a rounded corner. It does not have to turn into a right angle again. Just smooth those edges down so you don't see the seam. So the objective here is to not see the seam. You want it to look like that was always there. The next I'm going to do the bottom. I'm going to score the 2 sides that are meeting up on the 2 sides of the cup. So make sure you do it in this order. It's the best way to reach your hand in to be able to put the coils on all the sides you need to. So I'm slipping and scoring the 2 edges of the bottom and the 2 edges of the sides. I'm going to put those on there. So I'm using some pressure, firm but gentle, and squeezing those corners together. You should see a little air bubbles come out, a little bit of water. That means you really sealed it. Making a small coil and putting it between those 2 slabs I just put on there and sealing that edge. Once again, my objective here is to smooth that down, and I'm supporting both sides. So you see my right finger in there smoothing that down. My left hand is supporting the outside of the slab. And you're going to do that to every seam on the inside, especially since this is a cup. So you see inside there, I'm smoothing these down. It's important that you go in the same order I went because it's the easiest way to reach inside the cup as you build. Make sure every seam has a coil. Next, I put that other wall on, slipped and scored the same way I did the first one, scored it to the bottom, and I made sure I put coils on all of those seams, supporting with my hand and pressing with my right hand. If I don't support, I will have a very flimsy cup. I will push that wall out and it won't keep the straight walls. So now I'm compressing, making sure I don't see that seam. I'm going to get every single seam with a coil. I'm putting that last piece on, making sure that I've done every seam so far because I only want to do 2 seams once the cup is together. My slabs had been a little drier, they're a little wet, and that wall is sagging a little bit. So once I seal that on, I'm going to flip the cup upside down to give it a little more support. I'm going to use my fingers just to compress those edges together. And I'm using either 2 fingers or supporting it with my hand always. I'm not just pushing one side. I'm always using support. You want to seal those 2 seams together on the outside. You do not need to sew these seams as long as you have the coils on the inside. Once I feel it's a little bit supported, I'm going to flip it upside down or right side up and put some coils on the inside. So first I'm going to make a small coil for the bottom seam. So there's only 1 seam left on the bottom. It's difficult to reach, that's why I saved that for the last. I made sure that all my other seams had coils in them before I put that last side on. Slip and score and throw that in. It's hard to reach, so I'm going to use the sculpture tool as almost an extension of my finger and press that in there. It's going to be a little messy at first, but once I get all the pieces together, I can go in there with either with a sponge or with that rubber tool that's in front of me. So I'm using that like my finger on the inside that you can't see, and I'm using my pinky to help support that seam. So I'm never just pushing from one side. I'm going to use that sponge in a minute to help smooth that out. If you're having trouble, you can use that sponge now if your hand is small enough to get in there. And I'm going to roll one last coil to put that last seam together. Oh, I have two seams actually. Roll it out real quick, smaller than a pencil. You don't want it too thick. Stick it in there to measure it, and I'm just going to rip off the extra. So that's going right inside. If I can't reach my hand in, I can use the sculpture tool, but I'm going to make sure both of those coils are in there first. Once I have all the sides on, I'm just going to do my finishing touches. I can actually reach most of my hand in there. I'm going to support with my left hand. With my right hand, I'm smoothing those coils down, making sure I'm firm but gentle. I don't want to split the seam I just made. And I stood up for that. Now I'm going to use the sponge to help me smooth out the bottom and smooth those edges out on the inside as well. I want to start cleaning up the lip and the bottom. So I'm going to flip it over. Once again, compress those edges together. Use the sponge, make a nice smooth edge. You're going to lose a little bit of your texture. That's fine. You can have smooth edges. If you want, you can push the texture back in there later. Making sure I'm going around all the edges. So all the bottom edges and the side edges. Using the sponge again, making sure it's nice and smooth. A little teeny bit of water, not a lot of water. I'm using my fingers and pinching them together and running my fingers over those seams. And I want them to be rounded. So that last thing I did was round that off. I do not want sharp edges. I want them to be compressed so they don't chip and the glaze adheres to them. I'm going to keep going over it, making sure it's all right, cleaning off any clay that sticks to it that I don't want. And now finishing touches going around the lip, compressing the lip between my fingers and using the sponge to make a nice rounded edge since you're going to be drinking out of this. You don't want a sharp edge. Compress the edges with your fingers and the sponge. Making sure they're rounded and making sure the bottom has my initials. Making sure all the edges are good. You did it. Now the bowl is the same thing, just a different template. Make sure my initials are on it. The inside's nice and smooth. Once again, do not forget, you want your initials on the bottom. Make sure the inside is nice and smooth. Great job.